Welcome to the second ViveEcosse podcast. I am one of your hosts, Graham Spence, and today I am joined by Alison Graham. Alison, are you there?
I am. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very good. Now I'm only back. I've only been back a day, so I was away in Paris for the start of this week. So I've just been trying to catch up with everything that's been happening. There's been a lot happening in Scottish politics this week, hasn't there?
There has. It's been quite an exciting kind of weekend. A lot of events going on, which I'm sure we can get into some detail of in our podcast tonight.
It's a lot. I mean, first of all, I was rather amusingly in Disneyland Paris, of all places, and I was standing in a queue, and it came up, breaking news on my phone, that Ian Blackford had decided to resign, which I presume, I don't think he's actually decided to resign. It sounds more like he's been pushed from what I've been reading. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kind of conflicting messaging going out at the moment, but certainly he seemed very resigned to staying, and suddenly he's kind of resigned, or he's not restanding. So it's the SNP group in Westminster's AGM this week, so he's not putting his hat in the ring. So that would suggest strongly, and certainly some of the things that have happened just before that, like the indication Stephen Flynn was going to stand against, and then he kind of retracted it, and now he's kind of standing, and now we've got another candidate, Alison Thillis. All suggests that there's definitely a few movers and shakers and things going on down there at the moment. So it should be a very interesting week to see how that actually plays out.
I mean,
that's what's been going on there.
It seems to be on the back of they just didn't make any progress whatsoever. I mean, under Ian Blackford, what have we seen? I mean, what are the achievements? I struggle to actually list them. They walked out once. Did they do anything else?
Yeah. Well, I think we talked before about the Supreme Court decision and how, if you put the legal, question and answer aside, the catalyst of the event, like politically, and I think it has actually made people kind of step up and say, well, what now? And that starts to put a lot of pressure on, particularly because there's been discussion of the plan B, if you like, being a Westminster plebiscite. So that's something that the pressure's then on the Westminster MPs to actually win. And that's when people start looking and say, well, what have we done so far? What are the likelihood of success compared to, your record? Because it's always tough when you're in power, because you've then got to prove what you've done. You're not, it's not just all promises of what could be, but it's actually, there's more pressure on scrutiny on your record. So I think a lot of the MPs will be looking at that at the moment and say, how does this actually position them? Is there a reason that things have not progressed and have not had the kind of traction that many people hoped, particularly in the 2015 surge of SNP MPs in Westminster, the 56. I think there was high expectations of what they could do, and there's a lot of rhetoric, from Winnie Ewing's famous, we're here to settle up, not settle down, and I think that is now kind of coming back to bite them a wee bit. So it's a bit like team tactics, in a football game or something. You start to look at the management and think, are you actually picking the right side? Have you got the right players in the right position? So there's been definitely a lot of scrutiny. Obviously, you can't discount the situation with Patrick Grady as well. There was a lot of negative media on Ian Blackford himself there, and I don't think he covered himself in glory in some of the media he did after that as well. He has been in the media himself trying to counter some of the things. There's clearly, I hate to say it, but it so reminds me of some of the stuff that's going on in the Tory party. The people coming out on sides. It's like the whole Nadine Dorris, like cheering for Boris kind of thing, and getting it like really, really wrong, not reading the room. And there's been a lot of very typical kind of tweeting going on with some of the elected members and others within the party, like supporting, Ian, and then, supporting other candidates now that he's actually kind of stepped down. So you're starting to see that, this very, very tightly controlled party is now starting to look as if it's got a bit more life about it, to be honest. I think democratically, I don't see it as a bad thing if there's people, jostling there for position, as long as they're doing it in a constructive way and setting something forward that, okay, they are actually genuinely retrospectively taking account of what worked and what didn't work and how things can change. Because I think, if there is, as you said, lack of progress, there needs to be real scrutiny. Is what is the blockage? What's stopping them from having that progress? So it's very interesting what's going on at the moment, and I think whoever is actually the new group leader, I think has got a very interesting few months and probably not any longer than that, to really make a difference and show, particularly on who they decide to put in their team, who's like the whip and the deputy and the front bench, and who the kind of the team, what the team looks like after that. It's not one position. This is quite a significant opportunity to really address any of the issues that clearly are there, or there wouldn't be a shuffling of deck chairs, as it were. So yeah, that's all very, very interesting. Also, over the weekend, the Common Weal book launched, sorted a handbook for a better Scotland, and that was like the kind of antithesis of that. It was very good atmosphere. It was very constructive. You kind of felt so buoyed by just the kind of inspiration and the kind of collegiate, and kind of respectful. That sounds a bit kind of twee, but it really was a genuinely, okay, this seems possible approach. The people were there, quite a disparate group of folks from all across Scotland, lots of different areas of expertise and interest coming together on common purpose. And I thought, you know what? This is Scotland. This is what we need to do at scale, of be able to get people who are not, from the same background, but we can, really learn from each other and build something that's pretty special. So we can talk maybe a wee bit about that later. But yeah, that was my weekend. I'm still kind of a bit buzzing about it because it was just such a good atmosphere.
I think something that it's almost like the SNP, it is the worst possible time for them to be going through a leadership challenge in Westminster, because obviously the First Minister's just intonated that a plebiscite election is the next big thing. So this is the time when they really should be showing we are in control and we have a plan, and the plan is, and for a single issue election you still need to appear very competent when you go into it. And I think one of the big things that struck me is they don't really want this leadership challenge. They need it like a hole in the head, really. But at the same time, if you're going to have a plebiscite election, you're going to need someone a bit more adventurous than Ian Blackford, who is someone who's been playing the Westminster game now for tons of years. They've never achieved anything. He has no answers. There's a lot of debate just now on whether or not, the plebiscite should be a Holyrood election or a Westminster election. If you allow me a minute, there's two schools of thought you can kind of go into, and I'm very sorry to everybody who's listening along because it's a bit technical and geeky, but a Holyrood election, despite the fact they could probably call one and dare the other parties to vote against the First Minister, while they could force a plebiscite election in Holyrood, I don't think the result of a Holyrood election would hold much weight, because we've already established that Holyrood is, a subsidiary to the UK Parliament. It derives its power from the Scotland Act. So a Holyrood plebiscite, I don't know if that's going to cross any sort of threshold. Like, democratically, it means not much more than, passing a bill in the Scottish Parliament, which isn't enough to pass a referendum. So you then move on to the Westminster, which is the real, it's the democratic world leader and everything that should be recognised, and the mother of all parliaments and all the guff that they've been feeding us for years. So you come into that's the only one you can kind of do it. Is it Ian Blackford, the man who's going to lead that? Probably not. Then you've got to roll into, who is Stephen Flynn? Stephen Flynn's a character that we don't know much about. Alison Sealis, I know a little bit more about Alison Sealis. I think she's probably a bit more, known. But again, is she somebody of Westminster parliamentary leadership standard? Is she somebody who the international community is going to say this person has been speaking about this for, a very long time and commands the support? And then it's like you say, once you realise the SNP is out of ideas, and when you realise the SNP is not putting forward too many ideas, it doesn't take long to look into the field. And you're right, the Common Weal, I know which you're a director of, comes out with this great big book. And I mean, it is a great big book. I'm sure you'll correct me at some point, but there's pages and pages and pages within that, and tons of different topics from tons of different experts, and it makes you wonder, how have the Common Weal got it sorted when the SNP are about to have some sort of introspective moment to themselves?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's not. To be honest, I think everybody would have hoped this came from government, but pulling together experts to really scrutinise problems that are causing the barriers, and the key things we need to connect with people to make independence relevant to their lives. Why hasn't that been done by the government? So, Common Weal have kind of done this because nobody else has. It's not because there's any elbows out or anything. It's literally out of sheer blinking frustration that, a job needs done. Yeah, it's a bit like you say, like, if you want something done, ask a busy woman. It's like, if you want, policy written, ask the, kind of the left-wing think tank who are like, funded by small donors, like to keep themselves close. They don't have no government money, no advertising or anything. But it shows you what can be done when the will to do it is actually there. And there's, the egos are at the door. This is about getting the job done. It's not about any individual. That's what really came across to me in a big way yesterday. And that's the bit that really makes your kind of heart sore, if you like. It's a bit kind of cheesy, but it really was. It was quite emotional yesterday. It was like the team, the team were all on stage. But it was so evident that it was a team effort. Yeah, absolutely. Amanda here.
Did you read her article today? She was in the.
I did.
I was going to call it the Sunday Herald, but we don't have a Sunday Herald anymore. We have the Herald on Sunday.
No. Yeah. I did. I thought it was excellent, and it was good image as well. Yeah, but not challenging is where we're failing at the moment. We have to challenge thought, and I think Amanda put it very well. And I say all the time, it's our critical friends that save us, not the sycophants. The sycophants will just, see you fail. They won't stop you. They'll just tell you everything you're doing is right, and that doesn't help anybody. And it's something that I've been helping my kids with schoolwork and stuff just now, like exams and things coming up. And what I try and instill in them is that failure is an opportunity to learn. Mistakes are something that are invaluable for our learning journey. And it's like in politics, certainly having worked in in a corporate environment as you have, Graham, if things go wrong, that's a really quick place to make a difference, to change, particularly if you go wrong. If you make the mistake, then it's in your power to fix it. So that's actually the easy things to fix. But in politics, there seems to be, an absolute aversion to admitting mistakes. It's like a lot of effort goes into hiding mistakes. A lot of effort goes into, attacking people who try and fix things because they don't want it to get public. And, the whole thing for me is what is causing the total logjam in progress. And, you and I talk about it all the time. If you want to do politics differently, you actually have to do it differently. You have to look at transparency, and that's definitely what ViveEcosse is all about. I know you'll come on to say some of the things that we've been doing on our blog site to try and, because it's a learning experience for us. We genuinely want to see what works. Try things, what works, what doesn't work. Where can we make gains the next time? Where can we learn? Where can we avoid pitfalls? And I think if we put that approach to politics, and Common Weal over 10 years have learned so much. The team that they've got now, I was at the board meeting a few months back, and there was a lot of talk about this is a really good team. This is the team that seems to be really gelling. The board seems to be working really well together and supporting the team, and it's a really quite a diverse team. And you have to have that. A diverse ecosystem is a healthy ecosystem, and I know that because I've just been helping my son study for Nat 5 biology. But it's true. You have to have different voices, and that again is what ViveEcosse is all about. You have to have a diverse range of views and opinions, and you have to listen to them constructively, so you actually have got healthy debate. Otherwise, you're literally just talking to yourself.
On that, we have invited, we've now invited Alison Felix and Stephen Flynn onto the
We
podcast.
have.
So we've invited them to see. Now the odd thing is, neither of us are no longer SNP members. We are definitely on the outside. We don't get a vote. In fact, the SNP members don't get a vote. This is it's a very
They don't,
internal
no.
election to the SNP.
Yep.
But
It's an AGM. Yeah.
I think the reason we have to invite them on, and the reason that I hope they accept, is because I think people need to get to know who they are and why it matters. Why are these people even interesting to us? What are they going to bring?
Exactly. Well, the majority of MPs in Westminster are SNP MPs. So, they all have constituents who they represent. And this is the role of the person that will lead that group. So for me, a leader of that group should be somebody who represents the group and, represents your views, not decides. And I think some of the stuff that's been coming out from Ian Blackford has actually been quite eye-opening. A lot of it's been very much, this is what I think, so this is what I think the role is. And it's like, it's the old no I in team. Your role as a leader is always to make sure your team can succeed. And you can only do that if you listen to them, and you can only do that if you have got a representation of those views. And I think this is what the challenge for whoever replaces Ian Blackford is, to make sure that they fulfil the role for the team. The team are not working for them, they're working for the team. And that's something, again, just from a kind of business and just teamwork thing. I used to do a lot of teaching how to do teams and stuff. So and I think there's this kind of false sense of hierarchy rather than responsibility. A team leader has got responsibility.
That's a point. That's a good point. Have we got a spec? Have we got a job spec for the Westminster leader is something you become, but there's not necessarily a written down. Maybe we should do that. Maybe ViveEcosse should publish in the week coming. A specification for what the Westminster leader should be, what their job is, and what we should measure them against. That's a point.
That's a really good point, and it's something that's come up. Well, my daughter is doing modern studies kind of block just now at school, so she's been doing a lot of stuff for democracy, and she's asking questions like that. So how do you become an MP? What do you need to be an MP? And I was like, that's a really good question. There's not a job spec for an MP either, or an MSP or a councillor. And very much if you're employing somebody, you think about what skills do I need, what kind of person am I looking for, what experience or whatever, what are the kind of key attributes that will differentiate one candidate from the next, etc. But the electorate don't get that, even though, there's such a big, again, responsibility to represent people. You literally just get names pretty much and a ballot paper to stick a cross in. And it's funny because I actually proofread and edited the democracy section of the sorted handbook for Better Scotland book for Common Weals, which I was kind of briefly talking about yesterday at the launch. And obviously, democracy section is what underpins everything else, because it's the enablers, to have the system of power, how power is shared through a society. So it's really, really relevant. But when we were looking at that specifically, it's really important to understand, how it works and who understands how it works. Because if you can't access it, if you don't actually have the kind of political education, or you don't know the rules of the game, how do we expect the electorate to engage in it? If we really want people to engage in their own democracy, in their own society, and be a part of a change rather than a consumer of it, then we have to, the hard yards has to be done by politics. Politics have to make it easy. And I certainly get the feeling in my experience in politics that it's deliberately obscure. And I've just a huge amount of examples, particularly when we had a Tory MP here in Stirling, and I used to regularly message him when he was talking about the bins and whatever, slagging off the SNP council administration about the bins, or the MSP about transport or something. And I'd say, you do realise your job's for reserve matters? And I would list them out for him and say, so what's happening with this and another? Till he eventually blocked me, which is also, again, an interesting side of democracy. But, it's incumbent on, people in power to make sure people know how to measure them. And the idea of a scorecard to say, if you're seeking re-election, did you do, exactly what you said there? How do we know you've succeeded? If you failed, why have you failed, and what have you learned? And it's something that just people don't like to get their homework marked. So But yeah,
That's a really
maybe
good
we should
point.
just demand more.
They just, yeah, I think we've hit on something there that possibly that's could be a fun activity for us. Is coming up with a job spec. So if you're listening along to the podcast or you're watching along just now, please let us know your thoughts as well, because we should come up with something fun. We can make a nice little image or PDF. We could make them, and if we can get them on the podcast, we will compare them to the specification that's going along. Now, the other thing about this job, the other thing about this job is one that has international media on it. It has a huge performance against the Prime Minister, and it has a very complicated relationship with the First Minister. And that's where I think we've seen the suggestion so far that, you know, Alison Thewlis is possibly the First Minister's horse in the race, and that Steve Flynn is possibly, you know, the backbenchers, the rebels' choice down in Westminster. Now, Steve Flynn's never come across my radar as like particularly boisterously against the group. So, have you got any insight there, Alison? Have you ever heard of him being kind of this renegade leader in disguise?
I think it's definitely been bubbling under for quite a while. You know, it's kind of come up and then he kind of retracted, and which kind of, just from observations of the way things work, would suggest somebody, to coin a Glasgow phrase, somebody had a wee word with him, you know, like, so he had a wee kind of conversation with someone. So obviously, what's more interesting, I think, is why Ian Blackford then decided, okay, no. And again, if you look at just politics in general, just take it outside the SNP, I know certainly in 2015, a lot of the kind of Labour bigwig kind of incumbents read the room and stood down, you know, and I think it was like you stand down before you lose. So that's about writing your own kind of departure. So, you know, if you think you're on the way out, you want it to be in a controlled way. So I think clearly something happened to indicate that that Ian Blackford would not have the numbers. And I think there was kind of rumours of a kind of anybody but Blackford. So how key Stephen Flynn is in it, or he has just been the person, you know, that's holding the ball kind of thing. I thought it was really interesting. I don't think Alison Thewlis has ever had, you know, expressed any interest. And had Ian Blackford not stood down, I can't see her challenging him. So that would suggest that she is doing this to try and, you know, re-establish that kind of same status quo as way the group runs. But if that is the case, I would suggest it's probably going to be quite short-lived, because clearly there's enough rumblings and desire for change, like real change there, to be, you know, to bring this to a head in the first place. So again, I would, you know, humbly suggest the SNP read the room amongst their members and say, when a group of people want change, it's probably best to listen to why, because otherwise you're just trying to, you know, replace, you know, like for like, but without fixing the problem. So again, if you don't actually, one, admit you've got a problem, and two, try and understand what the problem is, then your solutions are liable to either make no difference or even make it worse. So I really kind of humbly suggest you read the room. You know, I only know Alison Thewlis really vaguely from being on the NEC. There was a few things that made me kind of like, what? Kind of eye-watering things that were said, which I thought was really odd. Stephen Flynn, I've never spoken to him. I've kind of obviously since he's put his hat in the ring, I've done a little bit of research into him, and I think Mandy Rhodes had put something up from Hollywood Magazine for all the kind of new intake from 2019, which was obviously a couple of years ago, to be fair, and it was quite a light interview, so I don't think it really tells us who he is. Yeah, but I mean, he's clearly got some support there. It looks as if, you know, Alan Smith, who's my MP, and Joanna Cherry KC are both, you know, from what I've read, putting their support behind him. So, you know,
that's interesting because Joanna would be considered by the general sort of populace of the more popular. The Nicola Sturgeon elements of the SNP to be a bit more of a maverick. So,
well,
but then,
I think what. Oh, Sorry, can't hear you.
No, I was just going to say I didn't think I would see Alan Smith and Joanna Cherry agree about the same choice. It must be said.
So I think that says less, to be honest, about Stephen Flynn and more for the need for change. So clearly there's, two MPs that, as you say, you wouldn't put together in a, that they're, on the same kind of thought process here. But they both want change, clearly, because, I think that there's maybe different reasons, but there is a need for change. And I think that's what the SNP would be wise to focus on, that, if you go for what you think is a safe, swap in, swap out candidate, then the conversation is not over. It's a bit like, Scotland in 2014, the referendum result was a referendum result, but the conversation's not been over since, because it's clearly not concluded. Other things have happened which has exacerbated it, like Brexit and stuff. So I think when the underlying problem's there, if you don't get to the root cause and resolve that, then it's just going to fester, to be honest, and potentially hit you an even worse time. Because your original point about timing is absolutely spot on. They shouldn't be having to deal with this now, but they are, because they haven't dealt with it before. And this is not new. This has been going on for a good while. I mean, the Patrick Grady thing was quite a long time ago, and and that was when it hit the media. I mean, a lot of people have known about this for a long time before then, that there was stuff rumbling on. So I think this shows you that if you don't deal with things proactively, you are forced to deal with them reactively, and it will probably be a time that's not optimal for you to do it. So proactive resolutions are always safer and cheaper and less risky. Yeah.
Well, I worked there in 2015 into 2016. And I'd done 12, 18 months, something like that. And I worked for the Westminster group. Well, I worked for Douglas Chapman MP, and I kind of ad hoc'd into some of the Westminster stuff. And it was very clear back then that, at that point it was Angus Robertson, it wasn't Ian Blackford at that time. However, they're very drop-in replacements for each other. Like Angus Robertson and Ian Blackford, there's barely, there's barely a little paper between them. There really isn't. And what was very clear to me, and I was just a staffer, is that there were effectively three groups within the body of the Westminster SNP group. In the first group, where the frontbenchers, and they took themselves very, very seriously, and they vigorously prepared and took up a lot of researchers' time and took up an awful lot of press time and everything to press home the opposition to every piece of legislation that was coming forward, which, in hindsight, it felt like the right thing to do at the time, but I mean, it was really like, I don't know, it was like a child paddling on water furiously. It continually splashed and made a lot of noise. I'm not entirely sure we ever got any output from that made any difference. The second group were the sort of disaffected backbenchers who were not in the tent, and certainly, there was very limited resource for them to get in at the central researchers, and there was very limited resource for them to get into the central press. So they kind of had to do things that generated their own press and generated this, and it was all about relevancy for their own re-elections. Again, when you're in that mindset of I've got to remain elected and I'm not in the intent, they already feel, they're outside the main tent, so they're already, they've got to play up to their constituents that it's still important. And they need to get their own press, they need to go and do their own thing. And then there was a kind of third set, and that was Alex Salmond at the time, him, Tasmina, and that sort of, and they were certainly, Alex Salmond was an experienced politician who kind of, I think he knew that they were treading an awful lot of water and were furiously kind of, and he had just obviously stepped down as First Minister and party leader, so I think he was keen to let everybody else kind of let the talent bubble up. Well, he kind of stood at the back as kind of, I don't know, the grandfather of the group, kind of giving some advice and helping people along, but ultimately letting them make their own mistakes and go like that. I think that's changed now. I think the group dynamic, from what I hear from people that I talk to and people that I know, and from obviously what you read online, is that you have the sort of front bencher still paddling away furiously, and I think a blog saying Ian Blackford gets up every single week and he's furious and outraged, and I mean the man has so much outrage that borderline unbelievable because it's all full outrage. I mean, he is upset by it, but he knows he's not going to affect it. He just has to put it on for the camera. The new second group are the sort of disaffected backbenchers that have brought around his removal, because they're thinking, well, I've got to turn up and we've got 3-line whips and we've got to, there's no point in a 3-line whip, because the truth is, as long as the Tories have a 3-line whip, and the Labour Party never really disagree with them these days, that it's going to pass. The legislation always passes. All these big bad bills keep happening to pass, whether the SNP turn up or don't turn up. They're just wasting their time travelling there. And then you've got the third group. And this is the group that I'm most annoyed about, and I think this is the group that we see are all going for one candidate rather than the Stephen Flynn character. They're kind of for the more, let's keep it how it is. And they're the comfy people, the people who seem to genuinely enjoy Westminster, enjoy, taking part in it. I don't believe they're against Scottish independence. I believe they're probably for it, but they're very slowly for it. They're very drag me there, and if it happens, it happens. But until then, I'm very comfy. And you know who I'm on about. The Pete Wisharts, the Stuart MacDonalds, the David Lindens, they all seem incredibly happy to be in Westminster. And I mean, I blogged about this as well. David Linden sent out he wrote to the Boundary Commission about the boundary. And I mean, it's so farcical because it's an online form that literally everyone can fill out. You just choose who you are, like constituent or member of Parliament. What is he sending a written document for in 2022? When the Royal Mail's on strike anyway. Yep. So it's not. There's no going to be any success in that letter arriving. But again, it's just, I'm in Westminster, look at me furiously writing my letters, my ivory paper, how important I am. I mean, it's all nonsense. It is just a great big show to feign importance. And,
it is.
Do you think that's going to change? Do you think we're suddenly going to get a re-energisation and we're going to see the SNP of 2015 that went in there to paint the benches tartan and storm out and storm in and,
No. And I tell you what, I mean, again, we've talked about this before, to be an agent of real change, catalyst, you can't be in power as well. It's such a double-edged sword when you're trying to kind of, you've got this kind of perception you've got to keep things steady. I think they've utterly lost focus on what they're there for. And, that's where the kind of, unless you've got something else that's driving you, something that you're really passionate about, and you tend to get, as you'll know yourself, things that you decide, I'm going to do this and I'm going to put energy and effort into this, I'm going to do it really well. And that becomes your focus. And, if you're a good constituency MP, that will include representing your constituents well. And then you've got other ones that, which, you kind of typically kind of call the kind of careerists. And that tends to be people that this is the epitome of their success in their career life. They would never be in a position like this anywhere like outside of being the one that gets a cross in the box. And there are elections that you could literally put a wheelie bin with a SNP rosette on, in the same way you could have done that with Labour for many, many years in Scotland. So you're really not voting for your sparkling personality, your intellect or credibility. Where you really see it is when people get reselected and they got a massive upsurge in the majority, particularly when they do it against trend. So the national trend, we're in a really interesting seat in Stirling. Stirling was very Tory with Michael Forsyth, who lives up the road, and for years, and then we had Labour for years, and then we had the SNP, which was on the 2015 national swing. And then we had a national downswing, which the Tories then won, and more recently in 2019 we had an SNP swing. So Stirling's a very swing seat. It's not got a particular party loyalty, but getting re-elected here is harder than getting elected. So certainly now, after the kind of Tory Labour thing, it's been SNP. It's gone from Labour to SNP to Tory back to SNP. So that begs the question with the plebiscite election that we kind of started this conversation off on. We need the SNP absolutely, if they are going to put all on red, as it were, with a Westminster election, they really are, they're playing a game they don't hold the cards of. They don't hold the cards of when it happens. They don't hold the cards of the franchise. It's a UK franchise, which doesn't really represent Scotland. The Scotland electoral franchise is very different. They've also got a system that works on seats. Now, you could say if you try and say, which is their position, if we get a majority of seats, that signifies, an independence negotiation. It begs the question, well, why haven't you done it now? You've already got a majority of seats. You've had a majority of seats since 2015. So why did you not trigger that in 2015? This is a majority? That's what I never understood. When that happened, that was like, a real ground shaking, political change. The unionists were shaken, and the SNP just went, oh, look at us, we're in power. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We didn't vote you for your sparkling personalities, I say. You were given power for independence, and really nothing happened. And that is the thing that I think when you look back in this with a kind of historical view, people will say, but why didn't they do something then? And I think that is the question. And you can't go back, but you can learn and say, if you get events, you have to see that as a catalyst and do something. If you don't ride the wave when it's in front of you, you can't guarantee one will happen again. So since then, obviously, there's been Brexit, another big political catalyst, and there was a lot of kind of hot air about it. But again, the SNP absorbed that into an SNP party political strategy for power. And I know that sounds really cynical, but I mean, I was genuinely, and I know a lot of other people, that I know who are involved or very interested in politics, particularly SNP supporters, were really taken aback by the bus about Stop Brexit. And it's like, hang on. And our MP, who I actually campaigned for at the time, we were knocking doors. We did a lot of work. I mean, huge amount of work. We were testing some, I'm saying we, not, just me and some friends in our areas were testing this kind of micro-campaign strategy to get a lot of kind of good data, because really the SNP weren't particularly interested in either growing out their vote or deepening their vote to make it more secure. It was a very much knock the door, get out the vote cards, make sure your vote, I've written about that in Vive, the whole thing about how to talk to the electorate. I can't remember what it's called now. Is it the broccoli one, as we call it, about how to get people out and how election campaigns want, what the electorate are actually looking for. So that was kind of one of the early ones, again, born out of frustration that there's very eager activists and you take them to communities and then you really squander the opportunity. I mean, I've got a friend who just said the best line, I just love it, that some of the canvasses that they've been on with some, party members, particularly kind of set of party members, it's like yodel drivers. They knock the door and run away before they answer it and literally get to the bottom of the drive and get their selfie. And, they kind of like people who are genuinely interested in what we're saying. I think I might be, actually. And it's interesting though, because I used to canvass with Bruce Crawford up here, who was our MSP, who was, I have to say, a fantastic MSP. And I know people, locally, like folk who are not independent supporters, not SNP folk or whatever, who really respect Bruce. Even though he was not in their party, they didn't share, the view on the constitution, but he was a very respected local MSP. And the reason they was, it was really crystallised when you went for a canvass with them. It was like a mobile surgery. You'd knock a door and they'd try, try all doors. If there's a couple of doors, we'll try them both. Last resort was to put a card through saying we've called and there was a number, to kind of get back in touch, because he genuinely wanted to connect, and he knew the areas really well. People knew him. He did local surgeries. He came to the people rather than expecting the people to come to him. And we've lost a lot of that in politics now. There's a big entitlement in politics. But Bruce would really, sometimes you would be at a door for 15 minutes because he was like taking down every problem and following it up and making sure everybody had notes and whatever, and made sure they had got to the bottom of it. Yeah. Now that might seem like, oh my God, this is taking 15 minutes out of a canvass we'd only scheduled 2 hours for. But do you know what? That vote becomes a sticky vote. You follow up, you've shown integrity, you've shown credibility and integrity.
Did Bruce live in the constituency?
Sorry, say again?
Did Bruce live in the constituency?
No, Bruce... No, he didn't live in... He lived in Kinross, I think. But he really knew the area very, very well because he was here a lot. I mean, he was knocking doors, and he did it for other people as well. It wasn't just for himself. So it kind of comes back to the view of public servants against like self-serving politicians. and the transactional nature of politics, that you knock people's doors when you want them to do something for you, like put a cross in your box, as it were, rather than what you can actually do for them and a genuine interest in what you can do for them. And I think certainly working a lot in community, kind of activism and community, activities, that's what you see time and time again. People are just scunnered with a kind of lack of trust that people who they should be able to rely on, just let them down a lot. It's like we were on our own out here during COVID. We got huge support from some individuals in the council, but the elected members were absolutely nowhere, and people remember that. And, I think they need to remember that we remember, and trust works both ways.
So, Alison, we obviously have one more thing we need to talk about today, which is that the Common Weal, as we spoke about earlier on the podcast, have brought out Sorted, which is the handbook for New Scotland. And Amanda Bergower was in the Herald on Sunday today,
yep.
And I liked the picture that was her facing off against Nicola Sturgeon, ideas versus no ideas, as it were. Can you were at the event, you were speaking at the event, can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And in true Blue Peter style, since we're ending on a positive and a high, ta-da, here it is, Sorted. And it is like a substantial
Sorted.
There it is, Sorted. We have it sorted.
Neil Buchanan.
Exactly. So yesterday was the kind of official book launch. A lot of the people who amazingly contributed to the crowdfunder to make this happen were there and could actually collect their books. My daughter and I were actually on the bookstall desk, and it was a great atmosphere. It was just lovely to chat to everybody. So, I mean, there's the book itself, and people who have been involved in the book. Like, I was one of the editor team, so we were like proofreading and making suggestions and stuff. It was a massive team effort, and that really came across. And I think that really crystallised yesterday. And when I was asked to do a bit at the launch, a talk at the launch, I was thinking, what am I going to say? Obviously people can read the book for themselves, and Robin McAlpine was the kind of like key speaker who took everybody through it and really inspired and it fired people up. Everybody I spoke to felt really energised by it, which was great. So when I was doing my bit, I really just kind of focused on what this kind of book not just says about Scotland, and it's a blueprint, a handbook for a better Scotland, as it says, but and it is really looking at what can we do better, and also there's a lot of like what can we do better and what can we do now as well. So this is really what an independent Scotland looks like or could look like in the next its first 10 years, which I think is a really clever way of looking at it. But having been part of the journey of this book, what I was looking at it is that this book, actually, the journey is a kind of blueprint to the way we do things, or the way we can do things to get a different outcome. And it was this kind of collaboration and the kind of, not been stopped by barriers. And there was barriers. There was a huge amount of barriers. I mean, it's a huge endeavour to do this. And, when looking at democracy section, all about how power is shared and what those structures look like, and questioning things that we know and take for that's the way it was always thus. If you don't actually focus back on what is the purpose of these things, like a parliament, like councils, assemblies, forums, mutuals, what is the purpose of these, and are we achieving it? And if we're not, why not? And how can we? And I think all these things came together in the creation of this book, which I just think is very circular, very kind of circular economy. What we're trying to show and how to do a better Scotland is kind of how we did this book. So, we got funding from the Scottish Independence Foundation. I know Ian Grant even has been on our ViveEcosse blog this week. He was one of the kind of IndieX speakers, so that he's part of the kind of retrospective view. And again, that in itself, us looking at a retrospective, is this continual learning idea, and that is very, very important in the book. Certainly in my role as a proofreader and editor, with the team, it was a fabulous team that were doing that. It was very collaborative. And very positive, very constructive, and it was taken in a very constructive way. We talked before about mistakes. these things were absolutely taken in the spirit as intended. Everybody wanted this to be a success, and nobody questioned that everybody wanted this to be a success. So there was none of the kind of that, why are you saying that? It was all very forward motion, which allowed this to be done very quickly. So from the initial seed funding, which is what SIF was really about how do we seed things to let them grow? And that this grew, and we took it to, because of print costs, and it started off, I think Robin said yesterday, the intention was like 150 pages. It's nearly 300 pages, so that's expanded. The illustrations are incredible. I mean, it's so beautiful. I mean, the two lassies who did the illustrations spoke yesterday as well, and I had a kind of wee chat with them kind of off stage. And that whole story as well about how this kind of like, you know, group of young illustrators and how they got involved, and they were doing work, you know, voluntary work, and it was just all very kind of, you know, meant to be. You know, all these component parts came together to create something really, really special, which has been a total, you know, genuinely honour and privilege to be involved in, you know, in any small way, and, you know, bringing some people together who I know, like Rob and yourself have been kind of like involved as well, and Rob doing some of the writing, and you know, being involved and doing some of the kind of reviews and support and what have you. So it's just been a really
nosiness at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, and I think
here's
the blueprint.
Is it the largest? I mean, is it the largest piece of work that's been done for independence since the white paper? I think it is.
It probably. I mean, I know there's a few other books out just now, which I've not actually had an opportunity to read yet, so I couldn't actually 100% say how long they are. But I mean, this is a big book, and it's also 300 pages. It's also incredibly easy to access, and that in itself is a skill. You know, the way it's been done, that you can dip in, dip out. And again, this was taken from advice from, I think it was Richard Murphy actually, who was involved in some of it. But he also kind of commented on some of the style, and because he's very good at doing, you know, like tweets that read very well. Do you know what I mean? It's very kind of like chunked up. So I think exactly his threads are excellent, and I think Robin very much took on board his feedback as to how to make it really accessible. So again, this is part of the kind of ongoing learning experience, and I think all the work, you know, the cumulative work and expertise and learnings over 10 years of Common Weal have come together in something that really feels quite significant. And for me, it's you know, after the Supreme Court, we talked about this, you know, this is the opportunity to be on a new path now for independence. But you need a blueprint as to, are we just going to go around the same hamster wheel, or are we actually going to properly consider where we're at? You know, but where we're at now, you need to be really honest with where you're at, what our assets are, and how we use them if we want different outcomes.
I've had a front row seat, oddly, over the last couple of months to seeing Amanda Bergauer, someone who I didn't know that well, only you know, 3 months ago, and I've had a front row seat to see her stress level elevate as the book came to nearing the end, because Amanda's, you know, quite a perfectionist. She is very proud of the work that has gone into this book, and she's very proud of the output. The event at the Drygate looked phenomenal. It had the right tone, the right sombre, it had the right... Everything just looked spectacular. Like, this was a really classy thing, especially when the last media event that we've all been privy to was Nicola Sturgeon seen almost on the hoof when the Supreme Court ruled against her. It was kind of a shoddy party backdrop with a couple of people in the audience that worked for HQ, and the rest was all journalists. And then you've got the Common Weals setting a different tone. You know, yourself, Amanda Bergauer, Robin McAlpine, you were all up there on the stage. You were given it, you know, you were given a big chat. You had this perfectly polished book, possibly, and I'm going to do my homework on this, or I'm going to get you to do the homework on this. I don't know which one of us, but we're going to get a word count. I think sorted. Probably word for word, it packs the same punch as the white paper, and secondly, it's probably the most substantive piece of work since the first referendum. I know it's been 10 years of the Common Weals work, but you know, even compiling that is difficult. You know, you can't just chuck things together and say, haha, you know, it has a flow, it has beautiful illustrations, like we're saying. You know, your art attack, here's one we made earlier, you've got there hiding. And I think the big thing from it is it starts the debate, it moves it on. This is the new blueprint. This is the new, we had something in 2014 with the white paper. This is what's next. Sorted is the new white paper in effect. This is where we start talking. And, the Common Weal, Manda, Robin, yourself, you all need a massive congratulations, because the truth is, we've had the Growth Commission and it chucked out its 11 points of nonsense, and we've had white papers, but the Scottish Government have not hit the right tone, and I think, do you know what? Well done, you guys.
Well, I have to say, I play a very, very tiny part in that. But there's a huge. I mean, Craig DL is a phenomenal individual, and we've got Caitlin, we've got Nicola, we've got Rory, we've got Leo. I mean, and I think that's what really was very special yesterday, is that it's not an individual there. We talked earlier about no I in team and all that stuff, but it really is. It's a cultural thing in Common Weal. It's an ethos. It's not it's not convoluted, it's not pretense, it's genuinely people have different skills and they value each other's skills, and there's no competitive, it's very collaborative. It sounds very kind of like happy clappy, but it's really not. It's just, having been involved in a few Common Weal things, like when we did university, which was like such good fun, but there was moments of chaos, but it all came together. And it's very much the whole don't sweat the small stuff. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's there for each other. Everybody shares the pressure. And you're right. There was a lot of pressure to get this right once it was committed, because particularly when you're going in, and Amanda was particularly keen. I can't ask anybody for money for this until we've got something that we can definitely get out. So, all these things, and again, it demonstrates the blueprint of Scotland. It's about being brave. It's about being balanced in your bravery, to say, we're not throwing jelly at a wall. We're not going to take people's money and just see what happens. We're going to balance this risk and say, you know what, we're willing to do the hard work here. And, also admitting when you need a bit of help. And the crowdfunder, we were absolutely all blown away. I mean, I know you were a bit involved in that as well. And, we thought, we'll go for a punt. We're literally just covering costs, because it had gone exponentially up with the print costs to get it out the door, which would have been, such a tragedy for us, and for the whole conversation in independence, had we not actually managed to get this out the door at all. So that first $5,500 was hit in 2 weeks. 2 days even. And then, we thought, well, if we can get, if we can get 500, can we print 1,000? And obviously, because you get economies of scale in the print costs, whatever. And then that was hit within a few days. And I think the crowdfunder closed on St Andrew's Day at just over 14 grand, which is amazing, because we do completely rely on small donations from individuals who are part of it. I mean, everybody who subscribes to the newsletter, everybody who donates to to Common Weal in any way, it's small or large, it's all absolutely appreciated. And it has been part of the team. It very much reminds me of my first job at Sun Microsystems, which people used to say it was very campus culture, so it's that kind of thing. And it very, very much reminds me that people used to say there's something you can't quite put your finger on, but it's a Sun culture. And it was this kind of collaboration. You had authority, but, it was very consensus. Things were done by the consensus, but you felt very empowered, regardless of where you were in the kind of food chains, as it were. So, and Common Weal for me is like that. That's close as I've ever got. And everybody I know who worked for Sun Microsystems thought they've never had, that experience again in their careers. And this is what I feel with Common Weal. And that is how we need to build Scotland. We need to get much better. We need to get much better collaboration. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which,
we've put our feelers out. We've asked the Common Weal if some of them, or one of them, or something would like to pop on and take us through sorted.
Yep.
But I think that's us now coming up in 45 minutes. So I think we have complete our blogging duties for this week. So absolutely. Blog 2 while we're still finding our feet. The ViveEcosse podcast is still brand new. We still haven't got a great name for it. We still haven't got a jingle for it. We still haven't got all those cool things that we're going to have in the near future. The site has some accessibility improvements that we've deployed this week, so I hope everybody has some fun, including finding our tag cloud. I'd like to thank all our new contributors. We've got some fantastic new contributors who you absolutely need to go and read about. Other than that, I'm ready to sign off. Alison, do you have anything else to add, finally?
I just want to close in one of my favourite illustrations from the book, which is the chapter that I edited, which is democracy. Just I don't know if it will come across on the video, but it's just absolutely stunning. And, you know, as an actual piece of artwork, just to get this book, never mind all the phenomenal ideas, and this kind of idea of the images, the words inspired the illustrators inspired, you know, the words, and, you know, I do honestly hope everybody gets an opportunity to have a look at this book, and hopefully it'll inspire you as much as it's inspired the Common Weals team to keep going.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Hopefully you can go and get your copy of Sorted, which is available on commonweal.scot. You can download it. You can not download it. Sorry, you can go in there and you can purchase your copy just now, and hopefully you will do so, and we can have a discussion. And I'm hopeful some of the people that are listening to this podcast today, or reading some of the posts we've got up, will think to contribute on their views, because Sorted, again, is a guidebook, it's a handbook, it's a great conversation starter, it's a diving board, and we would like to hear what everybody else thinks. This should be the start of the next Independent Scotland discussion. You've been listening to the ViveEcosse podcast. I've been Graham Spence. Alison's been Alison Graham, and we will see you again and hear you again next time. Goodbye.
Bye.